The young officer's voice was polite, the way a closed door is polite. "Sir, this area is reserved for credentialed personnel and invited guests. The public viewing section is back behind the ribbon." He gestured with 2 fingers, the way they teach you at the academy, firm enough to mean business, loose enough to avoid a scene. The old man standing near the side entrance of the auditorium didn't argue. He didn't produce a badge or a letter or any of the things that would have resolved the situation in 30 seconds. He simply looked at the officer with eyes the color of gunmetal on a cloudy day and gave a single slow nod, as if the young man had said something he already knew. "I'll wait outside," he said. His voice had the quality of gravel shifting under weight, not rough exactly, but worn down to something essential. He turned and walked back toward the double glass doors, and Special Agent Renata Ose, no, that name was on the list. The agent watching from across the lobby, a woman named Sylvie Adler, who had been with the Defense Intelligence Agency for 11 years, watched him go and felt a small, inexplicable unease settle in her chest. She had spent her career learning to read rooms. Something about the way that man moved was wrong, not wrong like a threat. Wrong like a category error. He wore a flannel shirt the color of old pine bark, the cuffs buttoned at the wrist. His trousers were dark canvas work pants, the kind sold at farm supply stores. His boots were brown leather, resoled at least twice, the toe box creased from years of the same pressure point. He was somewhere past 70, his hair white and close-cropped, his face deeply lined in the way that comes not from age alone, but from decades of squinting into sun and wind. His hands, which she had noted when he produced nothing from them, were large, knuckle-heavy, scarred across the web between the thumb and forefinger of his right hand in a way that suggested something sharp had passed through at speed. He didn't shuffle. He didn't hunch. He walked to the doors with the unhurried precision of a man who had long ago made peace with where his feet were going. Sylvie told herself it was nothing. She had a full agenda. The Whitmore Medal ceremony was in 90 minutes, and the Director of National Intelligence was somewhere in the building, along with 2 sitting senators and a former Secretary of Defense. The lobby of the Gerald R. Ford Intelligence Heritage Center was not a place for distractions. She turned back to her clipboard. The ceremony had been 3 years in the planning. The Whitmore Medal was awarded irregularly, only when the Oversight Committee unanimously agreed that a contribution to the intelligence community warranted it. In its 40-year history, it had been given 11 times. Today it would be given to the estate of a man named Colonel Preston Whitmore, for whom it was now named, and to 3 living recipients whose work during the Cold War's final decade had never been publicly acknowledged. Their names were not in any press release. Their photographs had not been provided to the media. 2 of them had requested that their faces not appear in any recording of the event. This was standard. This was the world Sylvie lived in. She did not think about the old man again until the ceremony began. He was standing on the far side of the glass, in the small exterior plaza that faced the parking structure. There was a single concrete bench out there, but he wasn't sitting on it. He was standing beside a bare-limbed elm tree, his hands loose at his sides, his face turned toward the building. From this angle, with the morning overcast pressing down, he looked like a figure from a photograph taken a very long time ago. The lobby had emptied. Sylvie lingered near the security station. One of the guards, a retired Army CD man named Packard, had noticed the old man too. Packard was the type who noticed things professionally and then filed them away without expression. "You see that gentleman outside?" Sylvie said. Packard glanced. Since about an hour before the doors opened, he say anything, asked if this was the right building for the event. I said the event was closed to the public. He said he understood. Packard paused. He thanked me. "Thanked you." "Yes, ma'am." Like I'd done him a favor. Sylvie looked through the glass again. The old man had not moved. He was watching the building with an expression she could not quite name. It wasn't longing. It wasn't resentment. It was something closer to the way you look at a place that holds something important to you, and you are deciding quietly whether it still deserves that importance. Inside the auditorium, the ceremony began. The deputy director gave the opening remarks. He spoke well, the way people in his position learn to speak, with gravity that is real but has been practiced until it sounds effortless. He spoke about sacrifice without specificity. He spoke about service as a thing that continues past the end of a career, past the end of a life. The 300 people in the room listened with the particular attention of people who understood that what was being described had actually happened, that the abstractions referred to events with dates and coordinates and costs. The first two recipients were brought forward. Both were men in their late 60s. One walked with a cane. The other accepted his medal with a steadiness that suggested he had rehearsed himself against emotion and was holding the line, but only just. There was applause, the kind that is not polite but grateful. Sylvie stood at the back of the room near the secondary exit and watched the stage. Her earpiece was quiet. Everything was proceeding correctly. The third recipient's name was announced. For extraordinary contributions to source development and operational security across 3 administrations, the Whitmore Medal is awarded to Raymond Kowalski. The name was on the list of used names. She was searching for a name not on that list. Let the story continue and the name will come. The deputy director's voice continued, and Sylvie, at the back of the room, stopped listening to the words and started listening to the room itself. Because something had changed. It wasn't a sound. It was the absence of a sound. The room had gone very still in a specific way, not the way a room goes still when something goes wrong, but the way it goes still when something unexpected has gone exactly, perfectly right. She looked toward the stage, where the deputy director had paused in his remarks. He was looking at something she couldn't see from her position, and the expression on his face was not the expression of a man managing an event. It was the expression of a man encountering something he had not prepared for. She moved along the back wall until she had an angle on the right side of the stage, and then she saw it. The door to the right of the stage, the one marked staff only that led from the side corridor, had opened, and in the doorway stood the old man in the flannel shirt. He hadn't come through the front. She had no idea how he had gotten inside. The building's secondary access points were keyed and monitored, and yet here he was, standing at the edge of the stage in his work boots and his faded shirt, holding his hands at his sides, looking at the 3 men seated on the stage with an expression she could now name. It was recognition. One of the 2 men who had already received their medals, the one who had walked with a cane, a man she knew only as Halverson, looked up from the program in his lap. He made a sound that was not a word. Halverson had been an officer in the Defense Intelligence Agency for 31 years. Sylvie had read his file. He was not a man who made sounds that were not words. The sound was barely audible, but in the stillness of the room it carried to the back wall where she stood. It was the sound of something that had been held shut for a very long time opening all at once. "Henry," Halverson said. The old man stepped into the light. The auditorium was silent in the way that places are silent when everyone in them understands that something is happening that protocol cannot address. The deputy director, to his considerable credit, did not speak. He stepped back from the podium. It was the right instinct, the instinct of a man who recognizes when he is not the most important person in a room. 2 of the security personnel on Sylvie's team moved from their positions toward the stage, hands at the ready, faces professionally neutral. Sylvie held up 2 fingers, then closed her fist. They stopped. She didn't know why she did it. She would think about it for a long time afterward. Some signal had reached her that she was not prepared to explain. Halverson was trying to stand. His cane slid and one of the other recipients, the younger one, reached out and steadied him without being asked. Halverson was on his feet by the time the old man reached the steps at the side of the stage. The old man climbed them the way you climb stairs when your knees carry the record of a great many years, without complaint, but without pretending it was easy. He crossed the stage and stopped 2 feet from Halverson. 300 people watched. "You're supposed to be dead," Halverson said. His voice was the voice of a man who is 69 years old and has not cried in perhaps 40 of them and is deciding, right now, whether today is the day that changes. "I know," the old man said. "It was easier that way. For a while." Halverson gripped his arm at the elbow. "My God, Henry, how long have you been here?" "Since before the doors opened." A pause. The young man at the security desk was very polite about it. A sound moved through the room then, not quite laughter, not quite a breath, something in between. The deputy director had recovered himself. He stepped to the microphone, his voice measured and careful. "Ladies and gentlemen, I believe some of you may already understand what you are witnessing. For those who do not, allow me to provide some context." He glanced at the old man, who gave no indication either way. The work cited in today's ceremony, the framework of source protection protocols that prevented at least 4 confirmed penetrations of our intelligence networks between 1987 and 1994, has been attributed in classified documentation to a working group designated only as Meridian. He paused. There was no working group. The room absorbed this. Meridian was one man, and we were not certain, until approximately 30 seconds ago, whether that man was still alive. Sylvie found that she had moved from the back wall to the center aisle without deciding to do so. She was standing in the middle of the room, her clipboard hanging at her side, watching the stage. "I should clarify," the deputy director continued, his composure fully returned now, "that we had reason to believe he might be. There were indications, but the individual in question had been extraordinarily thorough in his disappearance, and when someone at that level of competence does not wish to be found, we generally respect the professional courtesy of not looking too hard." A ripple of something that knew it was dark humor but wasn't sure it was allowed to laugh yet passed through the audience. "His name is Henry Falk. He held the rank of GS-15 in a division that no longer formally exists, under a program that was classified at a level that still prevents me from stating its name in this room. What I can tell you is this." The deputy director looked at the old man on stage, and for a moment his prepared voice fell away completely. Every significant counterintelligence success this agency achieved in the final years of the Cold War ran through the methodology he built. Every officer trained in deep source handling since 1992 has learned from principles he established. The curriculum exists, the protocols exist, the results exist, but his name appears nowhere, because that is exactly what he asked for. He picked up a small wooden box from the table at the side of the stage and walked it over to Henry Falk. Falk looked at it. He didn't reach for it. "I didn't come for that," he said. His voice was not unfriendly. It was simply accurate. "I know," the deputy director said. "He held it out anyway, but it belongs to you." Falk looked at the box for a long moment. Then he looked at Halverson. Then he looked out at the room. 300 faces, most of them people who had spent careers in the business of controlled information and necessary silence, and he seemed to be taking inventory of something. "I came," he said, addressing the room directly now, not the deputy director, not the stage, "because I heard they were putting Halverson's name on a wall, his and Odom's and the others." He nodded toward the two men who had already received their medals. "I wanted to be here for that. That's all I wanted." A woman in the front row, who Sylvie would later learn was Halverson's daughter, pressed her hand to her mouth. "These men did the work," Falk continued. His voice had not changed its register, but the room was so quiet that every word was entirely clear. "I designed a room. They lived in it. For years. In conditions that most people in this building have never been asked to face. Halverson spent 19 months in a position where a single wrong word would have ended his life, and ended the lives of the people around him. Odom ran an asset inside a ministry where 3 previous handlers had disappeared. These are not abstract contributions. These are the things that did not happen because of what these men did." He stopped. He seemed to have finished. The room was completely silent. Then Halverson reached out and gripped Falk's forearm, and the sound that he made this time was not a word either, but it didn't need to be. Sylvie realized she was holding her clipboard against her chest, the way you hold something when you have forgotten you are holding it. The deputy director quietly placed the wooden box on the table beside Falk and returned to the podium. He didn't announce anything, he simply waited. The applause when it came was not the applause of a ceremony. It was the applause of people who had spent careers operating in a world where acknowledgement was almost never possible, recognizing the one moment when it was, and choosing not to waste it. It was sustained and without performance, and several people in the room were not applauding because their hands were occupied with other things. Sylvie watched Henry Falk stand on the stage and receive it. He did not smile in the way of someone enjoying attention. He stood the way he had stood in the lobby, the way he had stood in the parking plaza, with his weight centered and his shoulders level, as if readiness were simply the state he returned to when nothing else was required. He accepted what the room was offering with the same quality he had shown all morning, the patience of a man who has learned that almost everything resolves itself if you give it enough time. After the ceremony, the reception moved to the adjoining hall. Sylvie found herself navigating the usual geometry of these events, clusters of conversation, the careful diplomacy of seating arrangements near the food tables, the way that people who have spent careers maintaining distance from one another find it difficult to simply stand next to each other and talk. She found Falk near the windows, looking out at the parking structure with the same attention he had given the building from the outside. "Mr. Falk," she said. He turned. His eyes were direct without being aggressive. They were the eyes of someone who has spent a great deal of time measuring the distance between what people say and what they mean. "You're the one who waved off security," he said. It wasn't a question. "I thought I might regret it if I didn't," she said. He almost smiled. "That's good instinct. How did you get in through the side corridor?" "The badge reader on the East Service entrance runs on the old access system. It hasn't been updated since 2019. The credentials from before my retirement still work." He said it without apology or pride. It was simply information. Someone should tell facilities. Sylvie looked at him for a moment. "You came without an invitation and stood outside in the cold for 3 hours. "I wasn't sure I'd come in at all," he said. "I just wanted to know if it was the right building." She thought about Packard saying that the old man had thanked him, like he'd done him a favor. Was it? Falk looked back through the window at the bare parking structure and the overcast sky beyond it. His jaw tightened almost imperceptibly, the same small movement that must have been the most emotion his face permitted under pressure. "Yes," he said. "It was the right building." Across the room, Halverson was sitting with his daughter, his cane across his knees, speaking quietly. His daughter's hand was over his. He was telling her something, and whatever it was had taken 50 years to say. Falk watched them for a moment. Something in his face that had been very carefully maintained for a very long time settled into a different configuration. Not soft, not sentimental, something more precise than either of those words. The specific expression of a man who built something difficult and dangerous and necessary, and then stepped back to watch other people live inside it, and is seeing, for the first time, that it held. "I should go," he said. "They'll want to speak with you," Sylvie said. "The director is here. There will be people who—" "I know," Falk said. He picked up his coat from the back of the chair he hadn't been sitting in. "Give them my regards. Is there somewhere I can reach you if it's necessary?" He looked at her. "You're Dia," he said. It was not a question either. 11 years. Then you know how to find someone who doesn't want to be found, and you know the difference between necessary and convenient. He pulled on his coat. "If it's ever truly necessary, you'll find a way. Until then," he left the sentence unfinished, which felt, to Sylvie, entirely appropriate. She watched him move through the reception toward the main exit. People stepped aside for him without seeming to decide to do it. It was the same thing she had noticed in the lobby that morning, the quality in his movement that her brain had flagged without being able to file. He did not command attention. He simply moved through space in a way that caused space to accommodate him. At the door he paused once and looked back. Halverson had seen him. Across the width of the reception hall, through the clusters of conversation and the careful social geometry of the occasion, the two men looked at each other. Falk raised his hand. Not a wave. Something smaller and older than a wave, the kind of gesture that belongs to a shared language most people never learn. Halverson raised his. Then, Henry Falk walked through the door and out into the gray morning and did not look back again. Sylvie stood at the window of the hall and watched him cross the plaza. He did not take the direct path to the parking structure. He stopped briefly at the single concrete bench beside the elm tree, the one he had not sat on all morning, and he laid his hand flat on the backrest for a moment, the way you touch a thing you are saying something to, and then he walked on and turned the corner and was gone. Packard appeared beside her. "He leave anything?" she asked. "No, ma'am." Packard paused. "Left the bench, though." Sylvie looked at the empty bench through the glass. There are people, she had learned over 11 years in this work, who pass through the official record like current through a wire. They leave no mark on the wire. You only know they were there because of what lit up at the other end. Henry Falk had lit up 3 decades of counterintelligence work, had saved careers and operations and lives, and had asked for nothing, not even the acknowledgement that he existed. He had designed the room and handed the keys to other people and walked away. And this morning, he had stood in the cold outside a building for 3 hours, because a man he had put in harm's way a very long time ago was finally getting his name on a wall, and Henry Falk had wanted to be there for that. Not for the medal, not for the director, not for any of it, just for that. She picked up her clipboard. The reception would wind down in another hour. There were forms to complete, security logs to close out, a debrief to prepare. The work continued in its ordinary, necessary way. But she put the clipboard back down and stood at the window a moment longer, looking at the empty bench. Some people spend their lives making sure the right things happen without their names attached. The records don't hold them. The ceremonies don't always reach them. They exist in the results, in the operations that succeeded, in the officers who came home, in the sources who survived, and then they step back into the ordinary world and become indistinguishable from it. You almost miss them entirely, until the day you didn't.